Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. For those that know EFQM, I'm just going to hopefully update you. And for those that don't know EFQM, it's an introduction to us. My name is Russell Longmuir. I am the CEO, and I am joined today by my colleagues. Firstly, I think the most important person is our guest from Siemens, and that's Michaela Lawton, who is a business excellence champion there, and also my colleague Jeff Carter, and my co-host is Steve Gold. Really today what I want to do is give you a bit of an overview of EFQM, a little bit about our history and what we do now, because I think we've really gone on a transformation from our history 30 years ago. And the last 2 years has seen significant changes in what we do. At the end of the day, what we do is help organizations of any size, any shape, any ownership structure improve their performance whilst maintaining a focus on their contribution to society, wider stakeholders, their people, and overall have their purpose. What we do is what many consultancies do, but what we're trying to do is enable your people in your organizations to do self-improvement for the organization and hopefully develop themselves. We have many users of EFQM and the EFQM model, and I'll talk about the model a little bit. We have some real household names: Siemens, Bosch. Those that don't know Signify, it was Philips Lighting. So most of you have had Philips light bulbs in your house. It's now called Signify. We have schools, Bradstow, which is a special school based actually in Kent, but based out of Wandsworth in London, University of Winchester, City of Glasgow College. But also at the other end of the scale, we have United Nations, who is a member and sits on our board. A whole variety of organizations, large and small. The EFQM model is at our heart, and it was designed 30 years ago to help organizations have a pathway to go forward and improve. And at the time, it was around total quality management. Then it very much became about making your organization excellent. And now it's just about how to improve, how to become outstanding. Many organizations use the model and all that's behind it for many different reasons. Our history is very much around driving continuous improvement. But today, many organizations use it to build organizational resilience into their governance, into their processes, into their planning. The other really big aspect is that we provide an ability to benchmark your performance and compare it to other organizations of all sorts of sizes and anywhere in the world. Over 50,000 companies have used the model, so we have a lot of data in terms of actually mapping where you are as an organization in terms of reaching those real panacea, amazing times of being an outstanding organization, delivering to your stakeholders continually and really serving your purpose. It really helps understand the impact of market disruption, and many organizations used it over the last year with the COVID-19 impact, actually assessing where they were, where they needed to focus their efforts, where they needed to deal with change, where they needed to stop transformation. How were their stakeholders changing, their suppliers, their shareholders? And what was the change in agenda? And the last thing, probably the most important, is that every organization has to keep the lights on every day, but the biggest impact for all of us in organizations is constant change. And the model really helps you do that. And I think they're the real aspects and traits of our model today. When we actually break it down and say, how do we come about the model and what does it and how does it structure? If you think about it, it's pretty obvious. Why do organizations exist? Why does your organization exist? What is its purpose it's trying to fulfill? Once you have a purpose, then you have a strategy to reach your purpose, and that gives you the direction. How do you do it? It's really about execution. It's about how you drive value, how you respond to your needs of your stakeholders, how you manage transformation, how you structure your governance, manage your risk, and manage your people. All those elements of what you do to execute to deliver on your purpose. And then finally, probably the most important thing for many companies is actually what results do you get out of this process? Most important thing that we believe, and is a big change in the model, is really about foresight, future thinking, looking at the future, anticipating. Results can be actual, so data. They can be quantitative or qualitative, but there's also perceptions, and that's really very, very important. At the end of the day, your customer feedback is perception, it's customer perception. Some of that is really, really important. So they're the three elements of how we assess organizations and how we ask people to assess their own organizations. Why does it exist? What's the purpose? How do you actually fulfill your purpose and strategy, and what results are you looking for? Over the last 30 years, what makes amazing organizations has changed a little bit. I think these are the added on. For instance, we used to talk about leadership structure and how successful the leadership team was. Now we talk about leadership at every level. Self-responsibility, people being given responsibility in projects and teams. The other thing for us is the focus on culture and purpose, and obviously the culture of your organization is so important. And Michaela will talk a little bit about that element at Siemens. How do you want to change a culture? Well, why don't you start talking the same language? If everyone understands the same language, which could be delivered through the EFQM model, it makes a very, very big, large step towards that. As I talked about, the new model really deals with transformation and change as well as continued performance improvement. We really get at the aspect of organizations having to be flexible, agile, adaptable, and adaptive. So dealing with change all the time, dealing with different targets, dealing with conflicting stakeholder needs, and as I said, future focus. So these are the real add-ons that in the last 2 years we've added to the traditional EFQM model. And these are the new focus areas that I think all organizations really are pulling all of their resources towards. So the model has transformed over the last 2 years, and it really helps identify the traits of a fantastic and outstanding organization. For us, what's really important, our birth was through collaboration of companies and the EU and governments, but we very much believe that all companies should have at their heart an idea of how they will help the UN achieve the targets around sustainable development goals. And Jeff Carter will talk a little bit about how we think we can help companies. And Michaela will talk a little bit about her interaction with us around the UN SDGs. Other aspects for us are we really were the first management framework that focused on the importance that organizations must give to society. How can you help your people, the communities they live in, and the societies that those communities are part of? And it's very, very important for us. That's our purpose. How can we improve society through improving organizations? As I mentioned at the start, and I think this is a real key that I believe is more and more important, and Michaela talks about this as well, which is we are not a consultancy in the traditional sense, but the outcome is the same. You are having a facilitated process to help you improve. But what we do is we help you build your capability to manage change and transformation and continuous improvement, whilst giving you all the tools to do that. The way we do it, first of all, we have training. We have training for groups, trainings for individuals, and a training pathway. We have technology and methodology that allows you to baseline where you are and give you real insight as to where you are today. You cannot start improving, you cannot manage change if you don't understand where you sit today. And we are all one-eyed when it comes to sitting with our organizations. When we review ourselves, and we've had this experience across thousands of organizations and people within them tend to think they are 20% better than they really are. So we give you a little bit of a framework, we give you methodology and some rigor to really baseline where you are and understand where you could be. And lastly, we try and celebrate your success. So organizations have an ability to be accredited, to get third-party assessment, to become certified by EFQM, and individuals that go across our training pathway become assessors and become change leaders. And they join a community of thousands of individuals who've been doing this for years and assessing companies all around the world, and 50,000 companies who've received recognition from EFQM over the last 30 years. I talked about training. There's always a call to action out of any conversation, and what our call to action would be for this group is there is a real training pathway. If you want to improve your skills and your capabilities, learn a little bit about the model, it's a very simple process to start. It gets more complicated as you go through the assessment journey, and our organizational change leader course is probably world leading, combining neuroscience, psychology, different change theories, and how the model can work. Most important thing for English speakers is that our foundation course, which is a certified course and we provide a certificate, is actually free to use on the Future Learn platform. So no longer do you have to come to us or one of our partners to train in a classroom or in a digital classroom. You can actually go on to Future Learn and learn on demand. And that's helping us really spread the word around the world as much as we can at lower cost. How do we help you? Well, first of all, we've got a leading edge knowledge base. We've got content from everything from Harvard Business Review all the way through to good practices from assessments and companies that have shared. And you can go and look at knowledge base. A lot of it is free. Some of it's behind a paywall. But we can explain how, and if you're interested, how you can get more access to more information. The most important thing, it has information from people who have gone through an assessment or an experience with us and have shared their practices. The other element is we have put all of this and the ability to baseline where you are, how the model works, how you assess yourself, and the outcome on a technology platform. You can try out the technology platform for free, and there's an address at the end of this deck. And you can try one or two of our questionnaires, which are very simple to use. You can use them in a workshop, you can use them yourself, you can use them with your colleagues, just to get some feedback. The assess-based platform really is powerful. It allows multiple people in organizations to collect the data and content they need to assess, to self-assess, and then you can, if you wanted to, get a third-party view from us or one of our partners or an independent consultant who can actually assess what you've actually put in. And as I said, right from the start, we've got a simple questionnaire right through to a very advanced analytical tool where you have to know a little bit more about the model. Obviously, there's lots of, once you've gone through the model, there's lots of data available in terms of comparing your organization, looking at where weaknesses are across multiple organizations. So for instance, Signify are using it across 10 of their businesses globally, so they can compare the business, they can bring those who are not performing well up a little bit and those that are really outperforming to keep improving, but whilst all sharing great knowledge and content from each other. And there's no external assessment at all, it's all done internally. We've empowered their team to do that. So I guess I want to just quickly summarize and give you the 5 key benefits of sort of working with EFQM, understanding the model, and the assess-based platform. So overall, it's a real platform to give you a sense of how to manage change. But it gives you and your team a real benchmark for progress and improvement. You can measure your improvement in a world understood scale. It gives you real insight into your company and where it's performing, opportunities for improvement, areas where you might be weak, not just in terms of areas, but also your maturity. Are you really good at designing and implementing, but not so good at refining and re-implementing an improved version? It gives you an overview of where you're performing against global companies, both in multinationals, within your company. And I think the other thing, it gives you a much refined view of how you can assess initiatives that you've introduced and their impact on the business. At the end of the day, it's a world famous, well-trusted 30-year-old index and benchmarking scoring. So it's completely independent. This is not a Big Four consultancy coming in and doing an as-is analysis of you and giving their views. This is a consistent index that has been tried and tested across 50 countries over 30 years. So it really gives you an independent view of where you are and where you could be. The last point I really wanted to make before I hand over to Steve, and give you, and this has been quite a quick overview of really the benefits that we can give you. At the end of the day, ESG is the #1 issue within boardrooms and management teams at the moment. How do we respond to our environment, social, and governance requirements? What propositions have we got? What initiatives? And the one way of really stamping your mark as an organization is EFQM has been at the heart of society, sustainability, CSR, and sustainable goals and the UN Compact for 30 years. And if your organization is being assessed or using the model, you'll learn a lot more about ESG, and your focus will be turned much more to some of those other stakeholders that aren't just your financial stakeholders. And you'll really learn a lot more about some of your ESG initiatives, how effective they are, what impact they're doing, how you're improving them, and what impact they're making on society. So that's quite a quick run through of EFQM. We will have an opportunity to ask questions, and I think the most important thing is listen to one of our customers, Michaela. But first of all, let me hand you over to Steve, and please send your questions on the Q&A, and we will try and answer them at the end. So thank you for your time. I'll be back with you later. Steve.
Oh, thank you, Russell, and thank you for that introduction and for the introduction to EFQM. My name is Steve Gold, and I very recently joined the EFQM family. My responsibility is for EFQM in the UK. I joined EFQM from Oracle Corporation, where I spent 20 years with overall responsibility for Oracle's cloud business, specifically in the public sector, strategic accounts, business analytics, and big data. In the last 5 years I spent with Oracle, the EFQM platform was the most exciting platform that I was engaged with. So I'm delighted to have joined recently and look forward to hearing from you all specifically around the UK. But as Russell said, the most important person you want to listen to is our guest speaker. So I'd like to introduce Michaela Lawton, who is the Business Excellence Champion at Siemens and is also a STEM ambassador in the UK. And Michaela, I'd like to hand over to you, if that's okay, and we will take any questions for Michaela at the end of our session.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Russell. I'm not sure who's going to scroll through my slides. Is it Russell? Not sure. So I'm Michaela Lawton. As I said, I'm a work in business excellence for Siemens UK. I've worked with the EFQM model for many years. Everyone's probably heard of Siemens. We're a global company, digital pioneer. We focus on electrification and automation, and we've got 30 locations across the UK with 8,700 employees. And all of the Siemens business units within the UK use the EFQM model, as do other Siemens businesses globally. But in the UK, we've really used this for around 20 years now. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Or can I move that? Thank you. Yeah. So the impact, when I was thinking about the impact that the model has had, it really does vary. And Russell touched on this about how the model is so flexible and can apply to different organisations, but in terms of size, maturity. And obviously, the Siemens businesses in the UK are all very different. We've got manufacturing sites, we've got sales offices, and it really can be adapted whether you've got 5 employees or 5,000 employees on one site or multiple sites. And that's the real value of the model. And this list here, I'm not going to read through, but this was recently put together by one of the business units when they were sort of educating the employees on the update of the new model. And I think Russell's touched on most of them. But I think in terms of obviously managing change and continuous improvement, it is the continuous improvement culture that the model has really had an impact on Siemens. And I think that comes a large part due to radar. If you could move to the next slide, actually. Thank you. So one example, I said there were 30 sites. One example within Siemens is a digital factory in Congleton, Cheshire. And they have used the model for over 20 years now. And they started their journey by training employees in the model who started to use it for internal self-assessments. And then quite quickly, after about 18 months in 2003, 2002, they wanted that baseline that Russell was talking about. Are we as good as we think we are? And we were very fortunate in that we went for the Excellence Northwest, as it was then, so equivalent to the BQF now, and were externally assessed, and we won the award. And people were really, really motivated, obviously by winning the award, but in terms of the valuable feedback that identified the strengths and foundations and also opportunities for improvement. And everyone was really motivated, and we quickly worked on all these opportunities of improvement, closing gaps, and went for a reassessment at the BQF the following year, and improved our score and recognition, and won again. And we carried our journey on there, and we went to what we call in Siemens the Premier League, so what is now called the EFQM Global Award, and previously was European Excellence Award. And we had a bit of a shock then, because that's the point where we thought, actually, we've been doing well, winning these awards, and suddenly we were amongst, global role models, and our score dropped. And this was quite difficult, I think, at first. But then we acknowledged the value in this feedback report. So external assessments, we've been working on internal assessments as well, but external assessments with this group of fresh eyes that are put together, a range of professionals, experts in their field, various knowledge, industry backgrounds, really added value. It's almost like having, a team of 6 to 9 consultants in your business for a week. It really does add value. And we've continued to go for external assessments as well as working on internal assessments. And we actually managed to be finalists in 2014 and prize winners, which was really a real achievement for us. And we do intend to go for an external assessment again in 2023 against the new model that we're adapting to. But this is just one example within Siemens, because it isn't all about external assessments and recognition. This was just the journey that this particular division took. And in between all those years of the external recognition and that baseline, we were doing internal assessments. These could have been replicating a full assessment, or sometimes were just a light assessment, looking at just the gaps and how much we closed them, or a deep dive into a particular area of the model. So if we wanted to look at just, you know, at the development of our strategy, the engagement in our strategy, or just our stakeholders and adding value to our stakeholders. So we've done deep dives into those things as well. And I'll give you another example of another Siemens business in a couple of slides. If you could go on to the next slide, Russell. So I touched on earlier about radar, and Russell hasn't mentioned this. I don't want to go into too much detail about the model because I don't want it to appear complex. It isn't complex. It's detailed and it's challenging, but that's why it adds value. It's certainly not complex, and hopefully this will give you a feeling of that. So radar is the logic behind the model, and radar stands for results, approach, deployment, assessment, and refinement. So very similar to plan, do, check, act that people may be familiar with. So it's just looking at this cycle in terms of defining the results, planning your approaches, deploying them in all the relevant areas, and then assessing the impact, and then refining your approaches, and then redefining the results, and going through this cycle. And this has been a huge impact on Siemens in driving our continuous improvement culture through employees engaging in internal assessments and using the model in their daily work. This has really become a way of working now. And when I'm an assessor as well, so I've assessed for the EFQM many times, and the thing that I find that really stands out for the organisations that are winning the awards or prizes is around the deployment and assessment and refinement, because it's quite easy to set results, define approaches, but we don't always close this circle. Do we carry on deploying them? Do we carry on assessing and refining them, keeping them up to date so we don't go stale? And that's what really stands out. So quite often I'll have gone to an organisation to assess them and seen a very similar approach to something we've got in Siemens. And then I'm thinking, well, why is that working so well? And it's all around the deployment and then the assessment and refinement. So this part of the tool and the logic behind it, simple, but detailed and challenging, and really adds value. Could you move on, please? I feel like Chris Whitty now with his slides. This is an example of Siemens Building Technologies. So they've used EFQM internal assessments to do what they call catch the second curve. So we've talked a lot about continuous improvement and the model identifying opportunities for improvement, but equally as important is it identifies your strengths, what you're good at, those solid foundations for your business that are giving you the platform to then take that transformational leap in improvements, and then obviously growth and excellence. At Siemens, we've got a really innovative culture. Innovation is one of our core values. But as part of that, we're lucky that people are always looking for the next shiny thing. And that's where the magpies on this slide come in, and we've crossed them out. We're saying we don't always want to be looking for the next shiny thing. We need to also be looking at what we're doing well and building on those solid foundations. And so we've used the model in that way within Building Technologies internally through sort of annual assessments, really, done by Siemens employees, not external. Okay, next slide. It's quite funny actually listening to Russell when he talked about stakeholders and the UN goals, because I was just thinking of two examples to give you of impact and trying to relate them to the new model update, because EFQM themselves live and breathe this radar and are continually assessing and refining the model itself. And every 3 years or as required, the model has an update. And the latest one, I think it's referred to as the 2020 model, probably for us has been the most transformational. But a lot of the stuff, those solid foundations have stayed the same. And the models always emphasize this long-term stakeholder-centric view. And in Siemens, we refer to this as like a balanced stakeholder strategy. And when I say balanced, I don't mean balanced in terms of equal weightings to the different stakeholders or focus. It's balanced in terms of making sure that we engage with all our stakeholders and add value to all our stakeholders, not just Siemens, our parent group. And the other area of the model that Russell was talking about was the societal impact. And this has been really important for Siemens. It's a core part of our strategy. Sustainability has been for many years, and the model's really supported that and probably been quite instrumental really in keeping that at the fore of our strategy. And we really are challenged now. We welcome this challenge of the UN SDGs really coming to the fore in the new model, and making us look deeper really into how we can add impact to those in what we're doing and improve our focus. So they're just two examples of the model. And the last slide. So I was thinking about, if anyone was wondering why I was agreed to talk today, because obviously we're members of EFQM and we want to support them. They support us on our excellence journey. But more importantly, when I heard that this was to introduce the model to people who may not be using the model, I was really keen because it's about growing the network. So as being part of EFQM, it's giving us this common language that Russell referred to, not just for us to talk within Siemens to different business units, whether we're talking to a factory producing drives and inverters or huge magnets within the healthcare division. It allows us to talk the same language about change, improvement, and share best practices. And then just as important, it's giving us access to external organisations who are willing to share as well. And these are just some examples of organisations that we've shared with, learnt from, and continued this excellence journey together. And you can see the variety. We've got manufacturing organisations similar to Siemens, BMW, Bosch, but then we've also got Barclays and Glasgow Housing Association. We learned huge amounts from them in terms of the purpose behind their organisation and their culture. So you can basically learn from anyone. And I know that all the people on the call today, even though they're not using EFQM, they will have incredible strengths, real solid foundations within their business that when we look at, we could learn from. So I'd be really keen to see more people join that network. And I think one thing today I would say, if you want to make sure this hour that you spent listening to all of us chatting is make a personal pledge, make it worthwhile, go away and have a think, whether it's to improve your organisation or you as an individual. Maybe try one of the training courses, the free training courses, or even look on the website. There's some of the EFQM questionnaires, so they're light touches introducing you to the model, and you'll very quickly see the impact it can have. I always say it makes us ask the right questions, and I think that's really, really important when we're trying to manage change and build capabilities. So hopefully we'll have inspired you today to have a bit of a deeper look into EFQM and maybe collaborate with Siemens in the future. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Michaela, thank you for that. That was extremely insightful. I'm getting questions coming through. So although you did answer one of the questions in advance, although you didn't know that, but there's a few questions that are deeply connected to what you were talking about. And if I may, what did you get personally, somebody was asking, out of the journey with EFQM?
Yeah. Oh, personally, I'm in the role that I'm in because of EFQM. So when Siemens first introduced the EFQM 20 years ago, I was working more in a business analyst role and then worked also in finance. And I got involved in some of the internal assessments. I really enjoyed it, loved the methodology in the model, the radar logic, and progressed then into business excellence. We actually didn't have a business excellence department within the division that I was working in at that time. And since then, we've built a whole community across Siemens, all very passionate about the model. So personally, it's really helped me develop my career. And I think the training I've received from EFQM has been so valuable because I use it every single day. And you don't have to be working in business excellence. If you've been trained in EFQM, you are definitely going to use that radar logic, asking those questions every single day in your daily work.
Well, that's great, and that leads me on beautifully to the next question. Because although you are the business excellence champion, and you were talking very enthusiastically about radar and the cyclical nature, but although I suppose what somebody's asking is, how do you go about spreading the word of business excellence and working with EFQM across an organisation so diverse as Siemens?
Yeah, I think many ways really. We have a business excellence community, so there are business excellence managers in each or most divisions, and we work together as a community. But I think it's more down to the business unit level really, and engaging the employees. So by using the model, I've seen organisations have huge success in only using the model at the senior management level. Nobody needs to understand the word EFQM, and it still can work. In most Siemens businesses, we took a different approach, and we really engaged and increased the knowledge and capability of our employees in the model using the radar approach. So that really got everybody engaged. And I think through really good communications, we were able to link the success of the business and achievement of results back to the model. So I think it's really been about engaging people in that as well. But it's not all, I have seen it work. It's not always necessary. I have seen it work in organisations where the management team are using that methodology. They're not using the language. It still can work.
Yeah, indeed. But you talked a great deal about, external assessments, but then you talked really a lot about internal assessments, which clearly very important. And it kind of sounds like an alternative to be using, expensive external consultants. But so in your mind, what was the biggest benefit of using the model?
The biggest benefit, I think I've already said, was the radar.
Yeah.
It's the radar logic has been the biggest benefit, and that really did drive this continuous improvement culture across the organisation. People could really understand that. They don't have to understand the whole model, all the individual criterion parts. There's business excellence to help them ask the right questions, but they all understand the radar logic, this results approach, deployment, assessment and refinement, and the importance of that, and driving this continuous improvement culture, which now is helping us manage the change and transformations.
Indeed. So this is the question that you did answer in advance, but I think it's worth reiterating. If you've got, a few words of advice for our audience today, what would you like people to do at the end of this webinar? What would you advise them as a next step? And now, as I said, you did answer some of that before, but I think it's worth re-emphasizing.
Yeah, I would really, really want people to do something. That's why I was talking about that, because, we're so passionate about this and growing this network. But I think probably my advice would be, if you're really new to the model, is to go on the website and have a look at the website. I actually learned something new today. I wasn't aware that there was free training on Future Learn. I'm going to be promoting that within Siemens as well. But I think if you go onto the website, there's a lot of things like the knowledge base. Have a look at the knowledge base. Have a look at the questionnaire, the very light touch of EFQM, and sort of whet your appetite, really. There's also the lenses that Jeff's going to talk about, which take deep dives into particular areas of the model. I think he's going to talk about the UN SDG lens, and that's another option. So it's probably a personal thing, because it's whether you want to start using it to develop yourself, which it's certainly valid for, or you want to use it to develop the organisation. I would say have a look at the website, see what whets your appetite, and then look a bit deeper.
Okay, well, thank you. That was a great answer, and thank you for reiterating some of that you said before. Michaela, there are other questions, but in the just time permitting, I'm going to let you go and follow up with any further questions, if I may.
Absolutely. Anything that comes through on chat, I will respond to. That's absolutely fine.
Much appreciated. Thank you
for having
Michaela.
me. Thank you.
Okay, so we've heard from Michaela and Russell. So I just want to take a couple of elements of what they discussed. Russell was talking about the ESG and number one issue in boardrooms. In the conversations I've been having in my new tenure, this is becoming more prevalent, more common. Russell talked about the first EFQM, first management framework with society at its heart. And it was very warming to hear Michaela talking about UN SDGs and welcomes the challenge that they pose. So I'd like to, from those points, introduce our next speaker. I'd like to introduce Jeff Carter, who has more than 30 years of operational senior management experience, a long association with business excellence management tools. Jeff currently supports EFQM and is leading the work with 2 new EFQM lenses, one based on the UN SDGs, and would like to hear more about that, if I may, as there is some depth to the lens work that Jeff has been undertaking. So if I may, pass over to Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to the party. I think Steve's probably covered most of what I'm about. Two major focuses for me. There is the SDG lens in particular, and the other thing is that I'm working with Gail Tutcher, who's the Director of Training for EFQM, on developing the training courses on the Future Learn platform. So that's pretty much the 2 areas that occupy my time for EFQM at the moment. So what I'd like to talk about now is to drill down a bit more into the UN SDGs and also link it with the presentation material that Russell talked about earlier on, which was linked with the assess base. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So you've already seen the picture of the EFQM model. Russell and Michaela presented that earlier. And that's the model that we use when we talk about doing, for instance, a self-assessment of the complete organization, on all the processes that it does, the strategy, etc., etc. What we've been developing in recent times is what we call an EFQM lens, which still respects the logic and the rationale of the model in the sense of the why, the how, and the what, the direction, the execution, and the results. But we have basically stripped the model down from the 7 criteria that make up the big model, if I can call it that, and rebuilt it to take a very focused look at a specific management topic. So at this moment in time, as we speak, we have a lens for innovation, we have one for disruption, and I'm currently working on the circular economy and also the UN SDGs. More specifically, there are 2 tools, there are 2 diagnostic tools that we use within the lens. One is a very simple, easy to complete questionnaire to get people started on the subject. The second one is a much more rigorous, much more robust diagnostic tool that calls upon the radar logic that Michaela has already been talking about. So these lenses are based on the principles of the model, uses the same criteria, but it just drills down with a particular focus on some management themes, some management topics. So for innovation, we have the questionnaire and we have the diagnostic tool already. For disruption, we have a questionnaire, and for the circular economy and the UN SDGs, those also are in questionnaire format, are already up and running on the assess base. What I'm currently doing, and Michaela will be aware of this because she was one of my guinea pigs, there are a number of organizations that have been testing the more rigorous diagnostic tool to do with the SDGs. So let's just go on to the next slide now then, please. Thank you. So what do the lenses deliver? Several points really. Training for leaders and organizations to understand the lens issue. So for instance, what do we mean by the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how do they impact upon my organization? So training for leaders and organizations to understand a bit more about the theme, about the management topic, and to act as a catalyst to facilitate to discussion and to self-assess the organisation in terms of its strengths and its opportunities for improvement when looking at this particular topic. So again, if I make it personal, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I spent most of the day with Michaela and some of her colleagues as they piloted and tested for me the UN SDG lens. So in addition to me getting some valuable feedback about what we'd produced in the draft version, they themselves had some significant conversations about what it actually meant for them as a business. So it is a great facilitator for the internal discussions, and they started to get a feel of where their strengths and opportunities for improvement were. A bit like the full model, when you're assessing yourself against the full model with the lenses, other organizations are using it, and Michaela's already talked about the network and the value of the network. You have the opportunity to learn from other organizations who are perhaps better than you in some of these areas. As we say, what does good look like? You get a benchmark against which you can track progress against the metrics. And I'll show you a slide a little bit later on in this presentation, which will give you some screenshots from the assess base of typically the sorts of benchmark data that we can provide. And whilst Michaela was talking about self-assessments, i.e. being done internally, and she also talked about being an assessor externally for an award process, it's the same for these lenses. There is the opportunity for an organisation, when it feels it's ready, to be assessed against using the lens by people from outside the organisation who have a knowledge of whatever the management theme is that's under inspection, in this case UN SDGs. And again, a reiteration of Michaela's point, you join a community of like-minded organisations. You have a shared common interest in the subject, be it SDG lens, circular economy, or innovation. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So there are 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And what you see on the tablet on this here is a screenshot that shows most of them. For each of the 17 SDGs, there are a number of targets. So when we were designing this latest version of the model, we wanted to try to build in and link the essence of what these 17 goals are all about into the questions that we're asking in the model. So we've done the simple questionnaire, and we're now building the more advanced analytical assessment tool, which will allow any organization, it doesn't matter what its size is or the sector, etc., to be able to assess itself in terms of the SDGs and what matters to them. Let me say at this stage that although there are 17 UN SDG goals, it is highly, highly unlikely that there's any single organization globally where all 17 SDGs apply to an organization. But part of an organization using the lenses is to act as a facilitator for the conversation to say, well, out of these 17 goals, which ones are the most important to us? Which are the ones that impact upon us? And or equally, which of these do we impact upon for better or for worse? Also recognize that the SDGs are, the targets and the indicators that are used are very, very high level. So it is taking the essence or the spirit of the goal, such as gender equality, for instance. Yes, there will be national government legislation, etc., on a country by country basis. But what about you as an organization? What you take the SDG number 5 on gender equality. What are the indicators that you would be using in your organization to indicate whether you are winning or losing in helping to achieve that goal by 2030? So step 1 in the conversation when you're using these the SDG lens, is to say, out of the 17, which ones are most important for us? Either because we impact upon them or we know they impact upon us. And I Typically, based on the work I've done so far, as I say, you're not going to get any organisation where they say all 17, but you might have organisations talking about having SDGs that they have a relationship with between 4 and 7 or 8. And I'm just trying to recall the work I did with Michaela a couple of weeks ago, and she can come in a bit later on when we have the Q&A. She can remind me how many SDGs that Siemens Congleton identified as being the ones of paramount interest for them. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, please. Already mentioned, I think, but worth repeating. So the simple questionnaire, Russell mentioned that it's free of charge to use. So you can go on to the EFQM Assess Base, and when you go on the landing page, and the bottom half of the landing page, that is where you will see the different lens tools available. And it's very, very simple. Click on the link and away you go, and then you can complete the questionnaire. You can do the questionnaire individually, or you can do the questionnaire as a team, a bit like Siemens and others have done previously. So by getting the team together to share a common view on the answers to the questions that the lens pose, you start to build a team-based view rather than an individual view on what the SDGs mean for us. So here's a typical example of what the output from the Assess Base will give you in the sense of the benchmarking comparisons and the metrics. The one extra chart there, just to spend 30 seconds on, is the picture in the bottom left hand, which says sentiment scores. We're just taking the opportunity to feed in here to you as well that one of the other aspects of the data analytics that EFQM provides is sentiment analysis. And what you're seeing there is the outcomes from the sentiment scores from the organizations that entered for the most recent cycle of the EFQM Global Award. So you can see we have the ability here to give you the feedback on and give you the opportunity to benchmark and compare with other organizations. Next slide, please. Here are some quotes, just as way of example, of the organizations that have been testing the UN SDG diagnostic tool in recent weeks. I'm not going to read them out loud. You can read them as well as I can, but you will see that they are all positive. Probably the key one that I will just highlight is the one at the bottom left, where it says, from the company's perspective, testing of the SDG lens proved to be an eye-opening exercise. And I think for everybody that I've been working with on developing the tool, pretty much they would all be saying the same thing. It is an eye-opener, and it's also a wake-up call and a call for action as well. So first step is, what do these mean for us? And be prepared to have your eyes opened. Okay, next slide, please. So there you are. You are now experts in the UN SDG lens, but if you do have any other questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer them. But I'll hand the floor and the microphone back to Steve, please.
It's okay, Steve. I'll take it from here. So this is Russell back. Just start my video. But yes, so thank you, Jeff. We've already had questions about the URL for Assess Base. It is available through our website. We will put that up at the end of the last slide. You will have the contact details, how to get hold of it. There's also Knowledge Base, which is also available through the website and we'll share the URL. It's coming towards the hour, and I don't want to take up people's time. We are going to ask you, there's a very, very quick poll straight after this, so please stay online. If you take the poll, then you will get a recording of this presentation, and also we'll share the slides. And what you'll have also is the contact from the team here at EFQM. For those of you, our website, efqm.org. Assess Base is just /assessbase. Probably the best contact to go through is Steve Gold or stephen.gold@efqm.co.uk. But as I say, those who take the poll get the recording. Please feel free to contact any of us, myself included. We're very prevalent on LinkedIn. We like to share our message. We think we're a not-for-profit organization. We're trying to do consultancy a bit different. Any profits that we make goes into creating new IP, sharing data, benchmarking, and not into the partners of the owners of the consultancy. So we have some of the world's biggest organizations and some of the world's smallest charities and third sectors who we work with. So we would love to hear more from you, so please get in touch with us. So I'm going to sign off. The poll will come up, and I want to thank you for your time today, and welcome or hello again to all those people joining us and learning about EFQM.